Alpha Ghost 9, Alpha Ghost 9, full breach protocol. The shout echoed across the military airfield at dawn. Warning lights didn't flash. Everyone stood frozen. Nobody understood what was happening, except one person, the woman sweeping Hangar 7. Hair tied back, bent over her work, uniform stained with oil and dust. She dropped her broom, walked straight to the control station. An officer whispered, "Dear God, only Alpha Ghost knows that code," but they were wiped from all records. Who was she? Thanbridge Air Base sat in the frozen Northern Territories, a remote installation specializing in emergency training protocols and fighter aircraft restoration, the kind of place where secrets went to be forgotten and personnel went to disappear. Every morning at exactly 4 a.m., a woman appeared to clean the technical areas. She never spoke to anyone. Nobody remembered her name. Most people didn't even notice she existed. They called her the cleaning ghost, not out of fear, but because she moved through the base like a shadow, present but invisible, essential but ignored. She wore standard maintenance coveralls, a plain baseball cap pulled low over her face, and thick work gloves that hid her hands. Her features were so unremarkable that even people who saw her daily couldn't have described her to security. But there were small details that should have made someone curious if anyone had been paying attention. She always checked the emergency exits during her cleaning routine. She wiped down every inch of the emergency response systems, even components that weren't on any maintenance schedule. She moved through restricted areas with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Staff Sergeant Brookman, a 27-year-old communications specialist, had once joked with her, "Why so thorough? You planning to fight a war against dust?" She just smiled quietly and continued her work without answering. The night before the incident, the unit received notification of an upcoming emergency drill. No specific time was announced. Standard procedure for testing readiness under unpredictable conditions. Lieutenant Radford had been assigned to coordinate the exercise. As part of the drill scenario, he'd been given a classified emergency code, Alpha Ghost 9, with strict warnings that this designation was known only to members of a disbanded special operations unit. The Ghost team had been dissolved years earlier, their operations classified beyond most clearance levels, their personnel scattered to different assignments or retired from service entirely. The code was supposed to be meaningless now, a relic from operations that officially never happened. At 4:47 a.m. the next morning, Lieutenant Radford shouted the code across the main hangar complex as part of his drill scenario. He expected confusion, maybe some questions about proper emergency procedures. He didn't expect anyone to actually respond to it, especially not the cleaning woman from Hangar 7. She was 50 yards away when he shouted the code, bent over a mop bucket, hair pulled back under her cap, looking like every other maintenance worker on the base. But when those three words, Alpha Ghost 9, echoed across the concrete, she straightened immediately, dropped her cleaning supplies without a glance, and walked directly toward the command tower with the purposeful stride of someone responding to operational orders. Lieutenant Radford's blood went cold as he watched her approach the secure access panel for the second-level command systems. Systems that required colonel-level authorization to access. She pulled a thin black card from her pocket and swiped it through the reader. The system accepted her credentials immediately. The woman he'd assumed was a janitor had just accessed command protocols that most officers on the base had never even seen. As security alarms began to sound, not from the drill, but from unauthorized access to classified systems, Radford realized he'd made a terrible mistake. He hadn't been conducting a training exercise. He'd just activated something that was supposed to stay buried. I once visited a training base like this, where young soldiers never paid attention to the cleaning staff. But I remember watching one woman clean an old radio like it was a weapon. Looking back now, I'm not sure she was just maintenance personnel. Lieutenant Radford sprinted after the woman, his radio crackling as he called for backup. "Command, we have unauthorized personnel accessing secure systems. Possible security breach in progress." The woman didn't acknowledge his presence. She was completely focused on the command console, her fingers moving across controls with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd used these systems many times before. But that was impossible. The second-level command protocols had been installed only 6 months ago. No civilian personnel had been trained on them. She inserted the black access card again and entered a series of commands that made Radford's training officer instincts scream warnings. These weren't random button presses. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The main display activated, showing system status readouts that Radford had never seen before. Emergency protocols that weren't in any manual he'd studied. Then the screen displayed something that made his heart stop. Active field code, Ghost 9 registered. Operator, Clara Vetra. Status, validated. Colonel Rawlins burst through the command center doors, flanked by 2 senior officers who'd been roused from sleep by the security alerts. The 54-year-old base commander had served in classified operations for over 30 years, but he'd never seen anyone access Ghost-level protocols, because Ghost Team wasn't supposed to exist anymore. "Who authorized this access?" Rawlins demanded, scanning the room until his eyes fell on the woman at the command console. She turned around slowly, removing her baseball cap for the first time since anyone could remember. The face that looked back at them was weathered by experience and marked by scars that spoke of operations conducted in places where failure meant death. But it was unmistakably the face of someone who belonged exactly where she was standing. "Clara Vetra," Colonel Rawlins whispered, his voice barely audible. "But that's impossible. You were declared killed in action during the Bravo Echo line operation in 2017. "Officially," she replied, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. "But ghost operatives don't die. They just go dark." A young officer who'd been watching the exchange spoke up hesitantly. "Ma'am, aren't you supposed to be maintenance personnel?" Colonel Rawlins never took his eyes off Clara as he answered. "Son, this woman once single-handedly disabled 3 enemy radar installations in 11 minutes. She's the only confirmed survivor of an operation that saved an entire civilian population from artillery strikes." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The woman they'd been ignoring for months, the invisible cleaner who'd moved through their base like a ghost, was actually one of the most decorated special operations soldiers in military history, and she'd been hiding in plain sight. "Why are you here?" Rawlins asked, though something in his expression suggested he already suspected the answer. "Because this base has security vulnerabilities that would get people killed if they're not addressed," Clara replied matter-of-factly, "and because someone needed to verify that the ghost protocols were still functional." She gestured to the command display, which was now showing system diagnostics that revealed weaknesses in the base's defensive networks, gaps in coverage that could be exploited, protocols that needed updating. "How long have you been conducting surveillance?" Rawlins asked. 18 months, since I was assigned here under civilian cover." "Assigned by whom?" Clara's expression didn't change. "By people who understand that some operations never really end. They just change frequency." Lieutenant Radford, who had been standing in stunned silence, finally found his voice. "Ma'am, I need to apologize. I used that code as part of a training exercise. I didn't know—" "You did exactly what you were supposed to do," Clara interrupted. "The system worked as designed. When someone calls for Ghost 9, the people who know what it means respond immediately." Colonel Rawlins made a decision that would remain classified for decades. "Clear the room, all personnel except essential command staff." As the junior officers filed out, Rawlins activated security protocols that would ensure their conversation never appeared in any official record. "Clara, I need to know, are you still operational?" "I'm whatever this base needs me to be, Colonel, but I'm not here to return to active duty. I'm here to make sure the next generation of soldiers understands something that took me too long to learn, which is that the most dangerous enemies are the ones you never see coming, and that the most valuable allies are the ones you don't know you have." She gathered her cleaning supplies from where she dropped them, preparing to return to her cover identity. "The drill results will show that your security protocols need updating," she said as she reached the door. "I'll submit a detailed report through appropriate channels." As she left, Colonel Rawlins realized that Thambridge Air Base had been under the protection of a legend for over a year, and none of them had been smart enough to notice. "I once talked to a former special ops soldier. He told me, the most dangerous person in any unit never makes noise. I still think there are people living quietly among us who've saved more lives than we'll ever know." Colonel Rawlins requested a private meeting with Clara in his office that evening. He didn't ask many questions at first. Instead, he showed her a photograph from the classified Bravo Echo line files. The silhouette of a woman rappelling between two cliff faces, carrying equipment that could disable enemy communications. "You survived when your entire team didn't, but why didn't anyone know?" Clara was quiet for a long moment. "Because I didn't want to be celebrated for failing to save my teammates." Rawlins opened the original Ghost Team training files on his secure computer, the records that officially didn't exist. Clara's operational profile was there, buried under classification levels that required presidential authorization to access. Ghost 9, Tactical Infiltration, Counterpulse Specialist, Classified Weapon Access. Her specialty had been neutralizing enemy detection systems before they could identify incoming threats. She was trained to operate in situations where radar couldn't react fast enough, where electronic countermeasures failed, where human judgment was the only defense against catastrophic failure. Lieutenant Radford had requested permission to attend the meeting. He stood at attention as Colonel Rawlins reviewed the file. "Sir, I need to formally apologize. I used that code without understanding its significance." Clara looked at the young officer with something that might have been approval. "Lieutenant, you did exactly what the protocol was designed for. When someone calls Ghost 9, the people who understand what it means respond immediately. No questions, no hesitation." "But I was just running a drill, and I was maintaining operational readiness. The system worked perfectly." Colonel Rawlins leaned back in his chair, processing the implications of what he'd learned. "Clara, this base has been under Ghost Team protection for 18 months and we never knew it. Never. That was the point. Ghost operatives don't provide security through visibility. We provide it through preparation." She gestured toward the window overlooking the main hangar complex. "This installation has 17 potential vulnerability points. Your personnel don't know how to respond to communications jamming. Your emergency protocols assume that electronic systems will remain functional under attack. And they won't? Not against enemies who understand how to exploit electromagnetic pulse weapons. Not against adversaries who've studied your defensive patterns. Not against threats that your training scenarios haven't prepared you for." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Staff Sergeant Brookman entered, looking uncertain about whether he should be there. "Sir, the enlisted personnel have been talking. We want to know if the rumors are true. About the cleaning lady being someone else." Colonel Rawlins looked at Clara, who nodded slightly. "Sergeant, what you've heard is classified at levels that I can't discuss, but I will tell you this. The woman you've been seeing around the base for the past year and a half has forgotten more about military operations than most of us will ever learn." Brookman's expression shifted from curiosity to something approaching awe. "Ma'am, some of us wrote something on the break room bulletin board. We hope it's appropriate." After he left, Rawlins pulled up the base's internal communication system. On the enlisted personnel bulletin board, someone had posted a simple message. "We used to walk past a legend and never saw her." The post had dozens of responses from soldiers who'd interacted with Clara during her time as maintenance personnel, stories about her thoroughness, her quiet efficiency, the way she seemed to understand systems that she shouldn't have had access to. "They're starting to piece it together," Rawlins observed. "Good," Clara replied. "They need to understand that threats don't always announce themselves, and that protection doesn't always wear a uniform." Over the following days, word spread through the base about the woman who'd been hiding in plain sight, But it wasn't gossip or rumors. It was something deeper. The younger soldiers began to pay attention to details they previously ignored. They noticed how Clara had always positioned herself near critical systems during her cleaning rounds, how she'd checked emergency equipment that wasn't on any maintenance schedule, how she'd moved through the base with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged there. They realized they'd been in the presence of operational excellence and had been too distracted to recognize it. A group of junior enlisted personnel requested permission to train under Clara's guidance. Not formal military instruction, but lessons in situational awareness, in recognizing threats that didn't fit standard patterns, in understanding that the most important skills couldn't be learned from manuals. "What would you teach them?" Rollins asked. "I'd teach them to see what's actually there, instead of what they expect to see. I'd teach them that the person who doesn't belong might be the person keeping them safe, and I'd teach them that real preparation means being ready for situations that haven't been invented yet." The request was approved, but with strict conditions: no official records, no publicity, no recognition that would compromise Clara's ability to operate under cover. The training sessions became known informally as silent deck exercises, small groups of personnel learning to observe their environment with the intensity of someone whose life depended on noticing details. "Why are you willing to teach them?" Rollins asked during one of their private meetings. "Because the world is changing faster than our training protocols. The next generation of soldiers will face threats that we can't imagine using methods we haven't developed. They need to learn how to think, not just how to follow orders." The transformation was subtle but significant. Base security improved dramatically as personnel began to notice irregularities they'd previously ignored. Equipment functioned more reliably because people were paying attention to early warning signs of malfunction. Most importantly, the soldiers began to understand that expertise didn't always announce itself, that the most valuable knowledge often came from the most unexpected sources. "You've changed how they think about security," Rollins told her. "I've reminded them that security isn't about having the right equipment. It's about having the right people in the right places, paying attention to the right things." As news of the cleaning lady revelation spread beyond Thanbridge, requests came from other installations for similar assessments. But Clara declined all transfers. "This isn't about creating a program," she explained. "This is about changing how people think about protection, and that change has to happen one person at a time. Type 1 move was enough if you believe real strength doesn't need to wear a uniform. It just needs to be in the right place at the right time." Colonel Rollins officially reinstated Clara's access to classified training protocols, but under strict conditions. No rank designation, no official recognition, no records that could compromise her cover status. She requested only one thing: a small training facility where she could work with selected personnel on situational awareness protocols. The program became known quietly as Echo Dark Team, not because it was secret, but because it focused on detecting signals that others missed. Clara's training methods were unlike anything in standard military curriculum. She didn't teach tactics or weapons handling. She taught perception. One famous exercise involved standing in the center of the main hangar with eyes closed. Students had to identify the number of people moving around them, based solely on footstep patterns, breathing sounds, and equipment noise. "If you can't tell who's approaching you in a controlled environment," she would say, "how will you survive when the environment becomes hostile?" Another drill required students to spend 30 minutes in different areas of the base, then report everything that seemed out of place. Not obviously wrong, just different from normal patterns. "Enemies don't announce themselves with sirens," she explained. "They reveal themselves through inconsistencies that most people ignore." Staff Sergeant Brookman, who became one of her regular students, described the experience. She could stand in the middle of the base and just listen for 30 seconds, then tell you exactly who was walking where and what they were carrying. Not because she had special equipment, because she'd trained herself to notice things that the rest of us filtered out. The training room she used was designated Silent Deck, Echo 9. The simple space with no electronic displays, No computerized training aids, no modern conveniences, just people learning to trust their instincts and observations over technology that could fail or be compromised. "Why don't you use more advanced training equipment?" Lieutenant Radford asked during one session. "Because equipment fails. Electronics get jammed, computers get hacked, but a soldier who knows how to observe and think will always have those skills available." The results were dramatic. Personnel who completed Clara's training showed significant improvements in threat detection, emergency response times, and overall situational awareness. More importantly, they began to understand that security wasn't about having the right technology. It was about having the right mindset. "What's the most important thing you've learned from this training?" Rollins asked Brookman. "That I spent months walking past someone who could have taught me everything I needed to know about staying alive. And I never bothered to pay attention because I thought I already knew what a soldier looked like." Word of the Echo Dark team spread to other installations, but quietly. No official reports, no publicity, just informal communication between personnel who understood that some knowledge was too valuable to bureaucratize. Requests came for Clara to expand the program, to formalize the curriculum, to train other instructors in her methods. She declined every offer. "This isn't about creating a system," she told Rollins. "This is about changing how people think, and that change has to be personal, individual. It can't be mass-produced." The small training facility at Thanbridge became something unique in the military, a place where the most advanced security training happened without any advanced equipment, where the most important lessons were taught by someone who officially didn't exist, where the most valuable skills were learned by people who'd been trained to recognize that expertise didn't always wear the uniforms they expected. Comment "train in silence" if you believe the most important lessons can't be found in any manual. They have to be earned through attention and respect. 3 months later, Clara stopped appearing for her morning cleaning rounds. A folded note was left on the base commander's desk, along with her black access card. "Ghost operatives don't disappear. They just change frequency. If someone calls Alpha Ghost 9 again, let the person who knows how to move step forward." The nameplate at Silent Deck, Echo 9, remained unchanged. No additional decorations, no plaques or commendations, just a simple room where extraordinary things had been taught by someone who'd preferred to remain invisible. Every year on the anniversary of the incident, new personnel would gather there at exactly 4:47 a.m. They'd stand in silence for 1 minute, remembering the lesson that expertise doesn't always announce itself. No speeches, no ceremonies. Just a moment of recognition for the understanding that protection often comes from people you'd never suspect. Colonel Rollins kept the black access card in his office safe. Occasionally, when new officers asked about the unusual training protocols at Thanbridge, he'd show them the card and tell them a simple truth. Security isn't about having the right equipment. It's about having the right people in the right places, paying attention to the right things. A message appeared on the break room bulletin board 6 months after Clara's departure. "Don't wait for orders. Just know when to move." No one knew who posted it, but everyone understood what it meant. The soldiers who'd trained under Clara carried her lessons throughout their careers. They became known for their exceptional situational awareness, their ability to detect threats before they materialized, their understanding that the most dangerous enemies were often the ones nobody noticed. They taught others, not through formal instruction, but through example, through the quiet competence that comes from understanding that real security work is mostly invisible. Years later, when junior personnel would ask about the legend surrounding Silent Deck, instructors would tell them about a woman who'd proven that the most important guardian could be the person everyone overlooks, someone who'd shown that true expertise doesn't need recognition, just the opportunity to make a difference when it matters most. And sometimes, late at night when the base was quiet, personnel on duty would swear they could hear footsteps in the empty hangars, someone checking the emergency systems that everyone else forgot to maintain, someone making sure the next generation was ready for threats they couldn't imagine. Clara Vetra had returned to the shadows where ghost operatives belonged. But her influence remained in every soldier who'd learned to see past appearances, to recognize value where others saw ordinary, to understand that legends often prefer to remain invisible.
If you believe in stories like this, where heroes hide in plain sight and protection comes from people you'd never suspect, leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to the Veteran Story. We remember what should not be forgotten. Real people are creating and telling these stories, not mass-produced AI.